A young nurse saved a man from a heart attack at a gas station, completely unaware he was a tech billionaire worth $3 billion. What happened next changed her entire world forever, proving that sometimes the universe has a way of rewarding those who act from pure compassion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Martinez had always believed that life was a series of small moments that either passed by unnoticed or defined everything that came after. She never imagined that stopping for gas on a Tuesday night in the Arizona desert would become one of those defining moments, the kind that splits your life into before and after. The digital clock on her Honda Civic's dashboard glowed 10:28 p.m. as she pulled into Desert Rose gas station on Highway 17, about 30 miles outside Phoenix. The fluorescent lights above the pumps buzzed with that familiar electric hum that seemed louder in the desert silence. After pulling a grueling 16-hour double shift at Phoenix General Hospital, covering for a colleague who'd called in sick, Sarah's body felt like it was running on pure willpower and the memory of caffeine. The desert heat still radiated from the asphalt, even though the sun had set hours ago. Phoenix in late August was unforgiving, the kind of heat that made you appreciate air conditioning like a life-giving force. Sarah's scrubs stuck to her back as she stepped out of her car, the warm night air hitting her face like opening an oven door. She'd chosen this route home because it was quieter than the main interstate, and tonight she craved the peaceful emptiness of the desert highway. As she inserted her credit card into the pump, Sarah couldn't help but do the mental math she always did at gas stations. $28 would put a decent dent in her weekly budget, but she needed fuel to get to work tomorrow night. Her student loans from nursing school weren't going to pay themselves, and every extra shift she picked up brought her a little closer to financial breathing room. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that mattered. The gas station was nearly empty except for a black Tesla Model S parked near the convenience store. Sarah noticed it briefly, thinking it seemed out of place at this modest highway stop. Most travelers who drove Teslas usually charged at the fancy stations closer to Scottsdale or downtown Phoenix. But she quickly dismissed the thought, focusing instead on the simple pleasure of finally being done with work for the day. The pump clicked rhythmically as fuel flowed into her tank, and Sarah leaned against her car, looking up at the star-filled desert sky. Out here, away from the city lights, you could actually see the Milky Way stretching across the darkness. Moments like these reminded her why she'd chosen to build her life in Arizona, despite being far from her family in Texas. There was something about the vastness of the desert that put everything in perspective. That's when she heard it, a sound that made her nursing instincts snap to immediate attention. It was the unmistakable sound of someone in distress, a gasping, choking noise that every emergency room nurse recognizes instantly. Sarah's head turned toward the source of the sound, her heart rate immediately accelerating as her professional training took over. Near the Tesla, a man was bent over, one hand pressed against his chest, the other grasping desperately at the car's door handle. Even in the harsh fluorescent lighting, Sarah could see the telltale signs of cardiac distress. His face was pale and drawn, beads of sweat covering his forehead, despite the fact that he'd likely been in air conditioning moments before. His breathing was labored and shallow, and he seemed to be struggling to stay upright. Sarah abandoned her gas pump without a second thought, her tired legs suddenly finding new energy as she rushed toward the man. As she got closer, she could see he was probably in his early 40s, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. Nothing about his appearance suggested wealth or status. He looked like any other traveler who'd stopped for gas on a long desert drive. "Sir, are you okay?" Sarah called out as she approached, though she already knew he wasn't. His symptoms were textbook signs of a cardiac event, and every second counted in a situation like this. The man looked up at her with eyes filled with panic and confusion, the universal look of someone whose body was betraying them in the most frightening way possible. I can't breathe," he managed to gasp out between labored breaths. "My chest. It feels like someone's sitting on it." His voice was strained, and Sarah could see the fear building in his eyes as he realized something was seriously wrong. Sarah's training kicked in with crystal clarity. She quickly assessed his condition, noting the classic presentation of what appeared to be a myocardial infarction. His skin was clammy and pale, his breathing rapid and shallow, and he was experiencing obvious chest pain and discomfort. These weren't symptoms you ignored or hoped would pass on their own. "My name is Sarah, and I'm a nurse," she said in the calm, authoritative voice she'd perfected through years of emergency room work. "I think you might be having a heart attack, and we need to get you help immediately." She gently guided him away from the car door and helped him sit down on the curb, knowing that keeping him upright would be better for his breathing and circulation. The man's eyes widened with a mixture of relief and terror at her words. Relief that someone with medical knowledge was there to help, terror at the confirmation that his worst fears might be coming true. "A heart attack?" he whispered, as if saying it quietly might make it less real. "But I'm only 42. I exercise regularly. I eat healthy." Sarah had heard variations of this response countless times in the ER. Heart attacks didn't discriminate based on age, lifestyle, or expectations. They struck when and where they chose, often catching people completely off guard. "Heart attacks can happen to anyone," she explained gently, while pulling out her phone to call 911. "The important thing is that we're going to take care of you." As Sarah dialed emergency services, she heard a small voice from inside the Tesla. "Daddy, Daddy, what's wrong?" A little girl, probably 8 years old, was peering out from the back seat, her voice filled with the kind of innocent concern that immediately tugged at Sarah's heart. The child had obviously been sleeping and was now waking up to see her father in distress. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sarah called out to the girl while keeping one hand on the man's shoulder. "Your daddy isn't feeling well, but I'm here to help him. I'm a nurse." She knew how important it was to keep children calm during medical emergencies, both for their own well-being and to prevent additional stress for the patient. The 911 dispatcher answered on the second ring, and Sarah quickly provided their location and described the situation. "I need an ambulance at Desert Rose gas station on Highway 17, about 30 miles northwest of Phoenix." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I have a 42-year-old male presenting with classic signs of myocardial infarction. Patient is conscious and breathing, but experiencing severe chest pain and difficulty breathing. While staying on the line with dispatch, Sarah continued her assessment of the patient. She checked his pulse, which was rapid and irregular, and monitored his breathing patterns. His condition seemed stable for the moment, but she knew that could change rapidly with cardiac events. "What's your name?" she asked the man, both to keep him talking and to gather information for the paramedics. "Michael," he replied, his breathing still labored but somewhat improved from sitting down. "Michael Chen. And that's my daughter Emma in the car. We were driving back from visiting my mother in Flagstaff." Sarah glanced back at Emma, who was now fully awake and watching the scene with wide, worried eyes. The little girl looked so small and vulnerable sitting in that big car, not fully understanding what was happening, but knowing that something was wrong with her father. It reminded Sarah of why she'd become a nurse in the first place, the desire to help families during their most frightening moments. "Emma, I need you to stay in the car for now, okay?" Sarah called out to her. "Your dad is going to be fine, but I need to take care of him until the ambulance gets here." The child nodded solemnly, her trust in Sarah's professional demeanor evident even in her scared state. The dispatcher informed Sarah that the nearest ambulance was about 12 minutes out, which felt like an eternity in a cardiac emergency, but was actually good response time for their remote location. Sarah knew she needed to keep Michael stable and conscious until help arrived. "Do you have any history of heart problems?" Sarah asked Michael, while continuing to monitor his vital signs as best she could without proper equipment. "Any family history of cardiac issues? Are you taking any medications?" Michael shook his head weakly. "No heart problems. My dad had a heart attack when he was 60, but I thought I had years before I needed to worry about that." His voice carried the disbelief that many cardiac patients experienced, the shock of a health crisis appearing without warning. Sarah noticed that his breathing was becoming slightly more labored again, and his skin was taking on a grayish pallor that concerned her. She helped him adjust his position to make breathing easier and continued talking to keep him alert and conscious. "I want you to focus on taking slow, deep breaths," she instructed, demonstrating the breathing pattern she wanted him to follow. "Try to stay as calm as possible. I know that's easier said than done, but stress can make your heart work harder, and we want to keep things as easy as possible for your heart right now." As they waited for the ambulance, Sarah found herself studying Michael's face. There was something about him that seemed familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. Maybe he just had one of those faces, or perhaps she'd encountered him during one of her shifts at the hospital. In her line of work, you saw so many people during crisis moments that faces sometimes blended together. The sound of sirens finally pierced the desert silence, growing louder as the ambulance approached their location. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, knowing that Michael would soon have access to the advanced cardiac care he needed. She'd done everything she could with limited resources, but paramedics would have the equipment and medications necessary to properly treat a heart attack. As the ambulance pulled into the gas station, its red and blue lights painting the desert landscape in alternating colors, Sarah remained by Michael's side, continuing to monitor his condition and provide reassurance. The paramedics jumped out of the vehicle with practiced efficiency, wheeling their gurney and medical equipment toward them. "What do we have?" the lead paramedic asked Sarah as they approached, recognizing her scrubs and immediately understanding that she was medical personnel. Sarah quickly briefed them on Michael's condition, symptoms, and the timeline of events, providing the kind of detailed handoff that helped ensure continuity of care. The paramedics immediately began their own assessment, checking vital signs, starting an IV, and preparing to transport Michael to the nearest cardiac center. Throughout the medical handoff, Sarah kept glancing back at Emma, who was watching everything with the wide-eyed attention of a child trying to understand a frightening adult situation. The little girl's presence added an extra layer of urgency to the situation, knowing that she needed her father to be okay. As the paramedics prepared Michael for transport, he grabbed Sarah's hand with surprising strength. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." His eyes were wet with tears, the combination of physical distress and emotional overwhelm evident in his expression. "Just focus on getting better," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand gently. "The paramedics are going to take excellent care of you, and you'll be at the hospital soon, where they have everything needed to treat heart attacks." One of the paramedics approached Sarah as they finished preparing Michael for transport. "Are you family?" he asked, looking between Sarah and Michael. "No, I'm just a nurse who happened to be here," Sarah explained. "I work at Phoenix General. Is there anything else I can do to help?" The paramedic shook his head. "You've done everything right. Your quick response and assessment probably made a significant difference in his outcome." He turned to Michael. who was now secured on the gurney. "We're taking you to Desert Regional Medical Center. They have an excellent cardiac unit." As they loaded Michael into the ambulance, Emma finally spoke up from the car. "Can I go with my daddy?" she asked in a small voice that broke Sarah's heart. "Of course, sweetheart," one of the paramedics replied kindly. "We'll make room for you in the ambulance." Sarah helped Emma gather a small backpack from the car and walked with her to the ambulance. The little girl looked up at Sarah with enormous brown eyes filled with trust and gratitude. "Are you going to come to the hospital too?" Emma asked. "Hopefully." Sarah's heart clenched at the question. She wanted to follow up and make sure Michael was okay, but she also knew that her role in this situation was essentially complete. The medical professionals would take over from here, and she was just a stranger who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time. "I need to stay here and finish getting gas," Sarah explained gently. "But your daddy is going to be in excellent hands at the hospital. The doctors there are very good at helping people with heart attacks." As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, its sirens echoing across the desert, Sarah found herself standing alone in the gas station parking lot. The fluorescent lights continued their steady buzz, and the desert night reclaimed its quiet stillness as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. She walked back to her car, where the gas pump had automatically stopped when her tank was full. As she completed her transaction and prepared to drive home, Sarah reflected on the unexpected turn her evening had taken. In her years as a nurse, she'd learned that medical emergencies could happen anywhere, anytime, to anyone. But there was something particularly moving about this encounter, perhaps because it had happened in such an ordinary setting during what should have been a routine stop for gas. The drive home to her apartment seemed different somehow, as if the landscape had been subtly altered by the events at the gas station. Sarah found herself hoping that Michael would recover fully and that Emma wouldn't be traumatized by seeing her father in medical distress. Children were resilient, but experiences like this could stay with them for years. When Sarah finally reached her apartment complex, she sat in her car for a few extra moments before going inside. The adrenaline from the emergency was beginning to wear off, leaving her feeling the full weight of her exhaustion from the long day. But underneath the tiredness was a familiar sense of satisfaction that came from using her skills to help someone in need. As she climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, she wondered if it might be news about Michael, but realized that was impossible since she hadn't given anyone her contact information. The message was just a routine notification from her bank about her gas station purchase. Inside her small apartment, Sarah went through her usual end-of-shift routine. She changed out of her scrubs, took a quick shower to wash away the day's stress, and made herself a cup of chamomile tea. As she sat on her small couch, she found her mind drifting back to Michael and Emma. She hoped they were both doing okay and that the cardiac team at Desert Regional was able to provide the treatment Michael needed. Before heading to bed, Sarah said a small prayer for Michael's recovery and for Emma's emotional well-being during what had to be a terrifying experience for a young child. It was a habit she developed early in her nursing career, taking a moment to send positive thoughts toward the patients whose lives she'd touched, even briefly. The next morning, Sarah woke up thinking about the events at the gas station. She considered calling Desert Regional to check on Michael's condition, but realized they wouldn't be able to share patient information with someone who wasn't family. She'd simply have to trust that he was receiving good care and hope for the best possible outcome. Sarah's Wednesday was supposed to be a day off, a rare opportunity to catch up on household chores, grocery shopping, and maybe even relax for a few hours. She'd planned to sleep in, but found herself wide awake by 7 a.m., her mind still processing the previous night's events. After making coffee and a simple breakfast, Sarah decided to take advantage of her free day by running errands. She'd been putting off for weeks. Living on a nurse's salary meant being careful with money, so she planned her trips efficiently to save on gas and make the most of her time off. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as Sarah was folding laundry in her apartment, her phone rang. The number wasn't one she recognized, and she almost let it go to voicemail. But something made her answer, perhaps the same instinct that had made her notice Michael's distress the night before. "Hello," she answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued folding clothes. "Is this Sarah Martinez?" The voice was male, unfamiliar but somehow warm and grateful. "Yes, this is Sarah." "Who's calling?" "This is Michael Chen. We met last night at the gas station." There was a pause, as if he was gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did. The doctor said your quick response probably saved my life." Sarah stopped folding laundry, surprised and pleased to hear from him. "Michael, how are you feeling? Is everything okay?" "I'm doing much better, thanks to you," he replied, and she could hear genuine emotion in his voice. "I had what they called a massive heart attack, but because you got help so quickly and kept me stable, they were able to minimize the damage to my heart muscle. I'm going to make a full recovery." Relief flooded through Sarah at his words. "That's wonderful news. I'm so glad you're okay. How is Emma handling everything?" "She's been amazing. A little scared, but she keeps talking about the nice nurse who helped Daddy at the gas station. She wanted me to call and tell you thank you from her too." Sarah smiled, touched by the little girl's thoughtfulness. "Please tell her she was very brave last night. That couldn't have been easy for her to see." "Actually," Michael said, his tone becoming more serious, "I was hoping I could tell her that in person. Would you be willing to meet with us? I'd like to thank you properly for what you did." Sarah hesitated, not because she didn't want to see them, but because she was uncertain about the appropriate boundaries in a situation like this. "You really don't need to thank me any further. I just did what anyone would have done." "But that's not true," Michael insisted gently. "Not. Everyone would have recognized what was happening as quickly as you did, or known how to respond. Most people would have panicked or tried to help in ways that might have made things worse. You quite literally saved my life." The conviction in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah found herself agreeing to meet them. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the hospital the following afternoon, neutral territory that felt appropriate for what Sarah assumed would be a brief thank you conversation. What Sarah didn't know, as she hung up the phone and returned to her laundry, was that this simple coffee meeting would reveal a truth that would change everything she thought she knew about the quiet, unassuming man she'd helped at a desert gas station. Sometimes the most extraordinary people appear in the most ordinary circumstances, and sometimes a single act of compassion can unlock possibilities you never imagined existed. Sarah spent Thursday morning preparing for her meeting with Michael and Emma, though she wasn't entirely sure what to expect. She chose a simple blue blouse and dark jeans, wanting to look presentable without overdressing for what she assumed would be a casual coffee meeting. The cafe Michael had suggested, Desert Bloom Coffee, was a small local place near Phoenix General Hospital that Sarah had passed countless times but never actually visited. As she drove through the familiar streets of Phoenix, Sarah found herself reflecting on how strange it felt to be meeting a former patient outside of a medical setting. In all her years of nursing, she'd rarely had follow-up contact with patients beyond their hospital stay. There was something both exciting and slightly nerve-wracking about seeing Michael and Emma again under normal circumstances when they weren't in the middle of a medical crisis. The coffee shop turned out to be a cozy, welcoming space with exposed brick walls, local artwork, and the kind of comfortable, mismatched furniture that made you want to settle in with a good book. The afternoon crowd was light, mostly a few people, working on laptops, and a couple of friends catching up over lattes. Sarah ordered a simple coffee and found a quiet table near the window, arriving a few minutes early to give herself time to settle in. Michael and Emma walked through the door at exactly 3 o'clock, and Sarah was struck by how different Michael looked compared to 2 nights ago. The pallor and distress were completely gone, replaced by healthy color and an easy smile. He moved with confidence and energy, showing no visible signs of his recent cardiac event. Emma bounced beside him, her hand in his, looking like any happy 8-year-old on an outing with her father. "Sarah!" Emma called out when she spotted her, breaking into a grin that lit up her entire face. The little girl ran ahead of her father, clearly excited to see the nurse who had helped them during their scary night. "Hi, Emma," Sarah replied warmly, standing up to greet them. "You look much happier than the last time I saw you." "Daddy's all better now," Emma announced proudly, as if she'd personally overseen his recovery. "The doctor said his heart is going to be fine and he doesn't have to stay in the hospital anymore." Michael approached more slowly, extending his hand to Sarah with a grateful smile. "You look wonderful," he said simply. "Thank you so much for meeting with us. I know this is probably unusual for you." "It's my pleasure," Sarah replied, shaking his hand and noting how much stronger his grip was than it had been at the gas station. "I'm just so relieved that you're doing well. How are you feeling?" "Like a new man, honestly," Michael said as they all settled around the small table. "The cardiologist said the blockage was significant, but because you recognized what was happening so quickly and got me help, they were able to restore blood flow before there was permanent damage to my heart muscle. I can't thank you enough for that." Emma wiggled in her chair, clearly bursting with something she wanted to say. "Daddy, can I tell her about the teddy bear?" Michael chuckled, his eyes crinkling with genuine affection for his daughter. "Go ahead, sweetheart." "The hospital gave me a special teddy bear while Daddy was getting better," Emma explained to Sarah with the earnest enthusiasm that only children possess. "And I named him Sarah Bear because you helped save my daddy, and I wanted to remember that forever." Sarah felt her heart melt at the gesture. "That's the sweetest thing I've ever heard, Emma. I'm honored to have a teddy bear named after me." "I brought him with me today," Emma continued, pulling a small brown teddy bear from her backpack. "I wanted you to meet him." She held up the bear, which was wearing a tiny nurse's hat that someone had clearly added after the fact. "He's perfect," Sarah said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "And I love his nurse hat." "Daddy got that for him," Emma said proudly. "He said all good nurses should have proper hats." As they chatted and Emma showed Sarah various accessories she'd acquired for Sarah Bear, Michael ordered coffee for himself and hot chocolate for Emma. There was an easy, comfortable dynamic between father and daughter that spoke of a close relationship built on mutual affection and respect. Sarah found herself wondering about Emma's mother, but didn't feel it was appropriate to ask. "I have to admit," Michael said as they settled in with their drinks, "I was hoping to learn more about the person who saved my life. Emma and I have been talking about you since that night, and we realized we know almost nothing about you, except that you're a nurse and you have incredibly good instincts in an emergency." Sarah felt slightly self-conscious under their attention, unused to being the focus of gratitude and curiosity. "There's really not much to tell. I work in the emergency room at Phoenix General. I've been a nurse for about 4 years now, and I was just driving home from work when I stopped for gas that night." "But where are you from originally?" Emma piped up with the directness that children excel at. "You don't sound like you're from here." "Good ear," Sarah laughed. "I'm originally from Texas, a small town outside of Dallas. I came to Phoenix for nursing school and just kind of stayed. I love the desert, and there are great opportunities for nurses here." "Do you have family back in Texas?" Michael asked, his interest seeming genuine rather than polite small talk. "My parents and my younger brother," Sarah replied. "They think I'm crazy for choosing to live somewhere where it's 115 degrees in the summer, but they've gotten used to it. I try to visit a couple times a year, but with work schedules and student loans, travel isn't always easy." Michael nodded thoughtfully, and Sarah noticed something in his expression that she couldn't quite read. It wasn't pity exactly, but perhaps recognition of the financial constraints that shaped many people's choices. "Student loans are tough," he said simply. "How much longer do you have on those?" "Oh, probably about 8 more years if I keep making minimum payments," Sarah said with a rueful laugh. "But that's pretty normal for nurses. The education is worth it, even if it takes a while to pay for." Emma had been listening to this conversation with the intense focus that children sometimes brought to adult discussions, even when they didn't fully understand all the implications. "Daddy," she said suddenly, "remember when you told me about how sometimes people help other people and don't ask for anything back? But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to help them too." Michael's eyes softened as he looked at his daughter, and Sarah could see the pride and love in his expression. "I remember that conversation very well, sweetheart. Well, Sarah helped us and didn't ask for anything," Emma continued with the logical progression that made perfect sense to an 8-year-old mind. "So maybe we should help her with something." Sarah felt a flutter of discomfort at the direction the conversation was taking. "Emma, that's very sweet of you to think about, but I really don't need anything. Helping your father wasn't about getting something in return. It's just what nurses do." "Ooh, but that's exactly why you deserve help," Michael said gently, "because you acted without any thought of reward or recognition. That kind of selflessness is rare, and it should be valued." There was something in Michael's tone that suggested this wasn't just polite conversation or abstract philosophy. Sarah got the impression that he was building towards something specific, though she couldn't imagine what that might be. "I appreciate the sentiment," she said carefully, "but honestly, seeing that you're both okay is all the reward I need." Michael and Emma exchanged a look that seemed to carry some kind of silent communication between them. Emma nodded seriously, as if confirming something they'd discussed before. "Sarah," Michael said, his tone becoming more formal, "can I ask you something that might seem a bit unusual?" "Of course," Sarah replied, though she felt a small flutter of nervousness at his serious tone. "What would you do if you suddenly had the resources to make any changes you wanted in your life? Not necessarily huge, dramatic changes, but the kinds of improvements that might make your daily life easier or open up new possibilities." Sarah blinked, surprised by the unexpected question. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." "I mean, if money wasn't a constraint," Michael clarified, "what would you do differently? Would you travel more? Change your living situation? Take time off work? Go back to school? I'm genuinely curious about what matters to you beyond your immediate financial obligations." Sarah found herself really considering the question rather than dismissing it as hypothetical. "Well," she said slowly, "I suppose I'd love to travel and see my family more often. And I've always thought about maybe getting my master's degree to become a nurse practitioner. But the time and money involved make that pretty much impossible right now. I'd also love to have a little more financial cushion so I wouldn't have to pick up so many extra shifts. Don't get me wrong, I love my job, but working 60-hour weeks gets exhausting." "Those all sound like reasonable goals," Michael said, making mental notes of her responses. "What about living situation? Are you happy with your apartment?" "It's fine for now," Sarah said diplomatically. "It's small, and the neighborhood isn't great, but it's affordable and close to the hospital. I'd love to have more space eventually. Maybe a place with a little yard or at least a balcony, but housing costs in Phoenix have gotten pretty crazy. Emma had been listening intently to this conversation, and now she looked up at her father with an expression that seemed far too knowing for an 8-year-old. "Daddy, I think we should tell her now." Michael looked at his daughter with surprise and a little amusement. "You think so? Are you sure it's time? She's nice and she helped us and she works really hard," Emma said with the matter-of-fact tone children used when stating obvious truths. "And she likes teddy bears, which means she's a good person." Sarah looked between father and daughter, completely lost by their cryptic exchange. "Tell me what?" Michael took a deep breath, and Sarah could see him gathering his thoughts as if he was about to share something significant. "Sarah, I haven't been entirely honest with you about who I am." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, feeling a flutter of concern. Had she misjudged the situation somehow? Was there something concerning about Michael that she'd missed? "I mean that when you saved my life 2 nights ago, you didn't just help any random traveler," Michael said carefully. "You helped someone who has the resources to change your life in very meaningful ways if you're willing to let him." Sarah stared at him, still not understanding where this conversation was heading. "I'm not sure what you're trying to say." Michael pulled out his phone and showed Sarah the screen. On it was a news article from TechCrunch, with a photo of Michael in a business suit standing in front of a gleaming office building. The headline read, "Cloud Tech Solutions CEO Michael Chen announces major expansion into AI healthcare applications." Sarah looked at the photo, then at Michael, then back at the photo. The man in the business suit looked like Michael, but somehow completely different. More formal, more polished, more powerful. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Tech Solutions," Michael explained gently. "We're a software company that develops cloud-based applications for businesses. We've been pretty successful over the past 15 years. Sarah continued staring at the phone screen, trying to process this information. Cloud Tech Solutions was a name she'd heard, though she didn't know much about technology companies. "How successful?" she asked, though part of her wasn't sure. She wanted to know the answer. "Very successful," Michael said simply. "The company is worth about $12 billion, and my personal net worth is approximately $3.2 billion. The coffee shop seemed to grow very quiet around them, as if the entire world had paused while Sarah processed this revelation. She looked at Michael, this man who'd been wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans at a gas station, who drove a Tesla, but not an ostentatious one, who seemed so normal and down to earth. "You're a billionaire," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am," Michael confirmed. "But that's not how I think of myself, and it's not how I want Emma to think of our family. We try to live relatively normal lives, despite the resources we have access to." Sarah's mind was reeling. She'd saved the life of one of the wealthiest people in the world, and she'd had no idea. No wonder Michael had been so insistent about meeting with her, about expressing his gratitude properly. This wasn't just a thankful patient wanting to buy coffee for his nurse. This was something else entirely. "That's why you don't travel with security or bodyguards?" Sarah asked, still trying to wrap her head around the situation. "I prefer to keep a low profile," Michael explained. "Emma and I were just driving back from visiting my mother, like any normal family. I don't advertise my wealth, and I certainly don't expect special treatment because of it. That night at the gas station, you treated me like any person in need of help, and that meant more to me than you can possibly imagine." Emma reached across the table and patted Sarah's hand with the gentle concern that children sometimes showed when adults seemed confused. "Are you okay, Sarah? You look surprised." "I'm very surprised, sweetheart," Sarah managed to say. I had no idea your father was so successful. Daddy always says that what matters isn't how much money you have, but how you use it to help people, Emma said with the wisdom of a child who'd been raised with strong values despite extraordinary privilege. And he said that since you helped us, we should help you too. Sarah looked at Michael, beginning to understand the true purpose of this meeting. What exactly are you proposing? Michael leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but kind. I want to change your life, Sarah. I want to eliminate your student loans, help you get that master's degree if that's what you want, and give you the financial freedom to make choices based on what you love rather than what you can afford. The magnitude of what he was suggesting hit Sarah like a physical force. She felt dizzy, overwhelmed, and completely unprepared for a conversation of this scope. Michael, I can't accept something like that. It's too much. Why? Michael asked simply. You saved my life. Without your intervention, I would have died on the pavement of that gas station, and Emma would have lost her father. What dollar amount would you put on my life? On her having her daddy? Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked at Emma, who was watching the conversation with the intense focus of a child who understood that something important was happening, even if she didn't grasp all the details. But I was just doing my job, Sarah protested, the same argument she'd made before. No, Michael said firmly but gently. You were off duty, driving home after a 16-hour shift. You were exhausted and just wanted to get gas and go home. You could have called 911 and stayed in your car until help arrived. Instead, you recognized a medical emergency, provided expert care, kept me stable until paramedics arrived, and comforted my daughter during the most frightening experience of her young life. That wasn't just your job, Sarah. That was heroism. The coffee shop around them continued its quiet afternoon rhythm, but Sarah felt as if she and Michael and Emma existed in a bubble of intense, life-changing conversation. Everything she'd thought she knew about that night at the gas station was being reframed in ways that made her head spin. I need to think about this, Sarah said finally, her voice shaky with emotion. Of course, Michael replied immediately. This is a lot to process, and I don't want you to feel pressured in any way. But Sarah, please understand something. For me, this isn't charity or pity. This is gratitude. This is a father wanting to thank the person who made sure his daughter still has a daddy. Emma, who had been remarkably patient during this adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. Sarah, do you think you might want to be friends with us? Even if Daddy gives you money to say thank you. The innocent question cut straight to the heart of Sarah's concerns. She was worried that accepting Michael's help would change the dynamic between them, would make her feel indebted or obligated in ways that felt uncomfortable. But looking at Emma's hopeful face, Sarah realized that the little girl was offering something much simpler and more precious than money, genuine friendship. I would love to be friends with you, Emma, Sarah said softly, no matter what happens with anything else. Emma beamed at this response, and Michael's expression relaxed, with visible relief. That means more to me than you know, he said quietly. As they finished their drinks and prepared to leave the coffee shop, Michael handed Sarah a business card with his personal contact information. I know this is overwhelming, he said. Take all the time you need to think about it, but please, don't let pride or discomfort prevent you from accepting help that could genuinely improve your life. You've earned this, Sarah. You've more than earned it. Walking to their cars in the late afternoon Arizona sun, Sarah felt as if she was moving through a dream. 24 hours ago, she'd been a nurse with student loans and a modest apartment, working extra shifts to make ends meet. Now, she was being offered life-changing assistance by a billionaire whose existence she'd never even suspected. As Michael and Emma drove away, Emma waving enthusiastically from the passenger seat, Sarah sat in her car for a long moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. The business card in her hand felt impossibly heavy, weighted with possibilities she'd never imagined could be real. That evening, Sarah called her best friend Jessica, who lived back in Texas, needing to talk through the surreal events of the day with someone who knew her well. "Let me get this straight," Jessica said after Sarah had told her the whole story. "You saved a billionaire's life at a gas station, and now he wants to pay off your student loans and fund your master's degree?" "That's the simplified version." "But yes," Sarah replied, pacing around her small apartment with nervous energy. "And you're hesitating because?" "Because it feels too good to be true," Sarah said. "Because I don't know what strings might be attached. Because I'm worried about what accepting something like this might mean for my independence and self-respect." Jessica was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sarah, honey, I've known you since nursing school. You're one of the most genuine, hard-working people I've ever met. You didn't save this man's life because you thought it would benefit you. You did it because that's who you are. If he wants to express his gratitude in a way that happens to change your life for the better, maybe the question isn't whether you deserve it, but whether you're brave enough to accept it." That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom, Jessica's words echoing in her mind. Outside her window, she could hear the sounds of the city that had become her home. Distant traffic, the hum of air conditioning units, working against the desert heat, the occasional siren from emergency vehicles heading to help people in crisis. Tomorrow, she had another shift at Phoenix General. Another day of caring for patients who needed her skills and compassion. But now, for the first time in years, she also had a choice to make that could fundamentally alter the trajectory of her life. The business card sat on her nightstand, a small piece of paper that represented possibilities she'd never dared to dream about. As sleep finally began to claim her, Sarah's last conscious thought was a question that would shape everything that came next. What did she really want her life to look like, and was she brave enough to reach for it? Sarah spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with Michael's offer, her mind churning through endless scenarios and possibilities. Every time she thought she'd made a decision, doubt would creep in from another angle. She found herself distracted during her shifts at Phoenix General, mechanically going through the motions of patient care while her thoughts remained tangled in questions she'd never expected to face. Friday morning brought an email that made her decision suddenly more urgent. The message was from Michael, written in the same thoughtful, respectful tone he'd used during their coffee shop conversation. He wasn't pressuring her for an immediate answer, but he was letting her know that he'd spoken with his financial advisors and legal team about the best way to structure his offer if she chose to accept it. The email detailed specific proposals that took Sarah's breath away. Complete elimination of her $68,000 in student loans, full funding for a master's degree program, including tuition, books, and living expenses during her studies, a housing allowance that would allow her to move to a safer neighborhood with better amenities. And beyond all of that, a substantial sum that would provide her with long-term financial security and the freedom to make career choices based on passion rather than necessity. Reading the concrete numbers made everything feel suddenly real, in a way that their coffee shop conversation hadn't. This wasn't just a grateful patient making vague promises about wanting to help. This was a detailed, legally structured plan that would fundamentally transform every aspect of her financial reality. Sarah printed the email and read it again, then folded it carefully and put it in her purse. She needed to talk to someone, but not Jessica this time. She needed advice from someone who understood the complexities of accepting help while maintaining dignity and independence. That afternoon, she found herself knocking on the door of Maria Santos, her former nursing instructor and mentor. Maria had been practicing nursing for over 30 years and had seen every possible variation of ethical dilemma that could arise in healthcare. If anyone could help Sarah think through the implications of Michael's offer, it would be Maria. "Sarah!" Maria exclaimed, opening her door with genuine pleasure. "What a wonderful surprise! Come in, come in. You look like you have something serious on your mind." Maria's house was exactly what Sarah had expected. Warm, comfortable, and filled with photos of the hundreds of nursing students she'd taught over the years. They settled in her living room with cups of coffee, and Sarah found herself telling the entire story from the beginning, from that night at the gas station through the revelation of Michael's wealth and his extraordinary offer. Maria listened without interruption, her experienced eyes taking in not just Sarah's words, but the emotional turmoil behind them. When Sarah finished, Maria was quiet for a long moment, considering everything she'd heard. "You know," Maria said, "finally, in all my years of nursing, I've seen many situations where patients or their families wanted to express gratitude to healthcare workers who made a difference in their lives. Usually it's flowers, maybe a nice card, occasionally a small gift. But what you're describing is unprecedented in my experience." "That's part of what makes it so overwhelming," Sarah admitted. "I don't have any framework for thinking about something like this." "Let me ask you something," Maria said, leaning forward slightly. "When you stopped to help Michael that night, what was driving your actions? What made you get out of your car and rush to help a stranger?" Sarah considered the question, remembering the moment when she'd heard Michael's distressed breathing. "It was just instinct, I guess. I heard someone in medical distress and my training kicked in. I didn't think about it, I just acted." "Exactly," Maria nodded. "You acted from pure compassion and professional duty. You weren't calculating potential benefits or rewards. You saw someone who needed help and you provided it, at considerable personal risk, given that you were alone at a gas station late at night." "But that's what any nurse would have done," Sarah protested. "Would they?" Maria challenged gently. "Sarah, I've trained thousands of nurses over the years. Yes, most would have called 911. Many would have stayed in their cars until help arrived. Some might have approached to offer basic assistance. But providing the level of skilled emergency care you described, while also comforting a frightened child, while managing your own exhaustion after a 16-hour shift, that's not standard behavior, honey. That's exceptional care driven by exceptional character." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks at the praise, uncomfortable with being singled out for what felt like basic human decency. "Now," Maria continued, "let me ask you another question. If Michael Chen were offering this same assistance to another nurse who had saved his life under identical circumstances, what would your advice be to that nurse?" The question stopped Sarah short. She tried to imagine counseling a colleague who was facing the same decision, and immediately realized that her perspective shifted when she wasn't the one potentially benefiting. "I guess I'd tell them to seriously consider it," Sarah admitted slowly. "Especially if I knew they were struggling, financially and working themselves to exhaustion just to stay afloat." "Interesting," Maria said with a slight smile. "So you can see the wisdom of accepting help when it's offered to someone else, but you struggle with accepting it for yourself. Why do you think that is?" Sarah stared into her coffee cup, trying to articulate feelings she hadn't fully examined. "I suppose I'm worried about what accepting something like this says about me, like maybe I'm taking advantage of a situation, or that I'm not strong enough to succeed on my own." "Those are valid concerns," Maria acknowledged, "but let me offer you a different perspective. Accepting help gracefully is not a sign of weakness. It's a recognition that we're all interconnected, that acts of kindness and generosity create ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate transaction. What do you mean? I mean that by accepting Michael's offer, you're not just benefiting yourself. You're allowing him to express his gratitude in a meaningful way, which clearly matters deeply to him. You're potentially improving the quality of care you'll be able to provide to future patients when you're not exhausted from working excessive hours. And if you pursue that master's degree, you'll be in a position to help even more people in advanced practice roles. Maria paused, letting these ideas settle before continuing. Moreover, you'll be modeling for other nurses that their work has value, that the care they provide matters enough that grateful patients want to invest in their futures. That's not a small thing, Sarah. The conversation with Maria helped clarify many of Sarah's thoughts, but it also introduced new layers of complexity she hadn't considered. She left Maria's house feeling more confident about the legitimacy of Michael's offer, but still uncertain about whether she was ready to accept such a dramatic change in her circumstances. That weekend, Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. She called Michael and asked if she could visit CloudTech's headquarters, not to give him an answer about his offer, but to better understand who he was and what his company represented. If she was going to make a decision that would link her future to his generosity, she wanted to know more about the source of that generosity. Michael seemed pleased, but not surprised by her request. "I think that's very wise," he said. "You should absolutely know more about me and my company before making any decisions. Would Monday afternoon work for you? I could give you a tour and introduce you to some of our team." On a Monday afternoon found Sarah driving through Scottsdale toward the address Michael had given her. CloudTech's headquarters turned out to be a stunning glass and steel building that managed to look both impressive and environmentally conscious. Solar panels covered much of the roof, and the landscaping featured native desert plants that required minimal water. The lobby was spacious and modern, with comfortable seating areas and walls displaying awards for various technology innovations and corporate responsibility initiatives. What struck Sarah most was the diversity of the people she saw moving through the space. The workforce appeared to include people of all ages, ethnicities, and backgrounds, suggesting a company culture that valued inclusion. Michael met her in the lobby, dressed in business casual attire that struck a balance between professional and approachable. "Welcome to CloudTech," he said warmly. "I'm excited to show you around." The tour that followed was revelatory in ways Sarah hadn't expected. Michael walked her through different departments, explaining the company's focus on developing software solutions that helped other businesses operate more efficiently and securely. But what impressed Sarah most was how he interacted with his employees. Every person they encountered clearly respected Michael, but there was no sense of fear or intimidation in their interactions. He knew details about people's projects, asked about their families, and seemed genuinely interested in their professional development. Several employees made a point of telling Sarah how much they enjoyed working for CloudTech, citing the company's commitment to work-life balance and employee well-being. "We have a philosophy here," Michael explained as they walked through the research and development floor, "that our success depends entirely on our people's success. So we invest heavily in creating an environment where talented people want to build their careers." "What does that look like practically?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious about how a tech company translated values into policies. "Comprehensive health care for employees and their families, generous parental leave policies, flexible work arrangements, substantial professional development budgets, and profit-sharing programs that ensure everyone benefits when the company does well," Michael listed. "We also have an on-site childcare center, a fitness facility, and a company policy that no one is expected to work more than 50 hours a week, except during genuine emergencies." Sarah thought about her own 60-hour weeks at the hospital and wondered what it would feel like to work in an environment where such policies were not just stated, but actually enforced. Their tour concluded in Michael's office, which was spacious but not ostentatious. The walls featured photos of Cloudtech's charitable initiatives, including technology centers the company had funded in underserved communities and scholarship programs for students studying computer science and engineering. "I wanted you to see this place," Michael said, as they settled into comfortable chairs near his office windows, which offered a panoramic view of the desert landscape. "Because I know that accepting help from someone requires trust. I wanted you to see how I approach business and leadership, so you could make an informed decision about whether you're comfortable with me having a role in your future." "I have to admit, this isn't what I expected," Sarah said honestly. "What did you expect?" "I'm not sure exactly. Maybe something more impersonal, more corporate in a cold way. But everyone here seems genuinely happy to work for you, and the company culture feels really positive." Michael smiled at her observation. "That's intentional. I learned early in my career that success without meaning is pretty hollow. Cloudtech's mission is to use technology to solve real problems for real people, and to do it in a way that creates value for everyone involved, not just shareholders." "Is that why you're so committed to helping me?" Sarah asked. "Because it fits with your company's values?" "Partly," Michael admitted. "But mostly it's because you saved my life, and because I've spent enough time with you now to see that you're exactly the kind of person whose success would create positive ripple effects in the world. You're not going to take this opportunity and use it selfishly. You're going to use it to become an even better nurse, to help more patients, and probably to mentor other healthcare workers the way you were mentored." As if summoned by the conversation, Emma appeared in the doorway of Michael's office, accompanied by a woman Sarah assumed was a nanny or family assistant. "Daddy!" Emma called out, then noticed Sarah and broke into a grin. "Sarah, are you here to see our office?" "I am," Sarah replied, standing to greet the little girl. "Your dad was showing me around. This is a very impressive place." "Do you want to see my favorite part?" Emma asked excitedly. "We have a really cool break room with games and a popcorn machine." Michael laughed at his daughter's priorities. "Emma comes here after school sometimes when I need to work late. She's become quite popular with the staff." "Everyone here is really nice," Emma told Sarah seriously. "And Daddy says that's because he tries to hire people who are good at their jobs, but also good people, like you." The simple statement from an 8-year-old somehow crystallized something Sarah had been struggling to articulate about her concerns regarding Michael's offer. She'd been worried about his motivations, about whether there were hidden expectations or strings attached to his generosity. But seeing him in his professional environment, watching how he treated his employees and how they responded to him, she began to understand that his offer to her was consistent with how he approached all his relationships, both personal and professional. After spending another hour at Cloudtech, including a visit to the famous break room that had so impressed Emma, Sarah felt she had a much clearer picture of who Michael was as a person and a leader. The man offering to transform her life wasn't a capricious billionaire making impulsive gestures. He was someone who had built his success on principles of fairness, generosity, and long-term thinking. As she prepared to leave, Michael walked her to the parking garage, with Emma skipping alongside them. "I hope this visit was helpful," he said as they reached Sarah's car. "It was incredibly helpful," Sarah replied honestly. "Thank you for taking the time to show me around and introduce me to your team." "Does this mean you've made a decision about my offer?" Michael asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't trying to pressure her for an immediate answer. Sarah looked at him, then at Emma, who was watching their conversation with the intense focus of a child who sensed that something important was being discussed. "I think I'm ready to say yes," Sarah said quietly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Emma let out a small cheer and clapped her hands together. "Really? You're going to let Daddy help you?" "I think I am," Sarah said, looking down at the little girl whose presence had somehow made this decision feel right in a way that all her logical analysis hadn't managed to achieve. Michael's face broke into a wide smile, but Sarah could see relief there too, as if her acceptance mattered to him in ways that went beyond simple gratitude. "There is one condition," Sarah added, causing both Michael and Emma to look at her with renewed attention. "What's that?" Michael asked. "I want to find a way to pay it forward," Sarah said. "I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I want your generosity to create benefits for other people too, not just for me." Michael's smile grew even wider at her condition. "I think that can definitely be arranged," he said. "In fact, I have some ideas about that if you're interested in hearing them." As Sarah drove home from Cloud Tech headquarters, she felt as if a weight she'd been carrying for years had suddenly been lifted from her shoulders. The constant stress of financial pressure, the exhaustion of working excessive hours just to stay, afloat, the resignation to a future constrained by student loan payments and limited resources, all of it was about to change. But more than the practical benefits, what filled Sarah with unexpected joy was the realization that she was about to embark on a new chapter of her life in partnership with people she genuinely liked and respected. Michael and Emma weren't just offering her money, they were offering her friendship, support, and the opportunity to be part of something larger than herself. That evening, Sarah called Jessica to share her decision, then spent time writing a long email to her parents in Texas, trying to explain how drastically her circumstances were about to change. She also wrote a thank you note to Maria, acknowledging how much her counsel had meant during this decision-making process. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah looked around her small apartment with new eyes. Soon, she would be able to afford something larger, safer, more comfortable. She would be able to visit her family more often, pursue her master's degree without financial stress, and make career decisions based on what excited her rather than what paid the most. But perhaps most importantly, she would be able to continue doing the work she loved, caring for patients, and making a difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments, without the constant background stress of financial insecurity. The last thing Sarah did before turning off her lights was to look at the business card Michael had given her, which had been sitting on her nightstand for days. Tomorrow, she would call him to begin the process of accepting his offer and planning for a future she could never have imagined just a week ago. Sometimes, Sarah thought as sleep began to claim her, the most extraordinary changes in life come not from grand plans or careful strategies, but from simple acts of kindness that create unexpected connections between people who are meant to help each other. Her decision to stop and help a stranger at a gas station had led to this moment, and she couldn't wait to see where this new path would take her. The transformation began immediately, though not in the ways Sarah had expected. Within a week of accepting Michael's offer, she found herself sitting in the offices of one of Phoenix's most prestigious financial planning firms, listening to advisors explain investment strategies and tax implications that she'd never dreamed would be relevant to her life. The experience was surreal, like suddenly finding herself fluent in a language she'd never studied. Michael had insisted on connecting her with his own financial team, people who specialized in helping individuals manage sudden wealth responsibly. Sarah initially protested that she wasn't suddenly wealthy, but Michael pointed out that relative to her previous circumstances, the changes in her financial situation were indeed dramatic enough to warrant professional guidance. The goal isn't Just to eliminate your current debts and fund your education, explained Jennifer Walsh, the lead financial advisor assigned to Sarah's case. Mr. Chen wants to ensure that you have long-term financial security that will allow you to make career and life decisions based on your values and interests rather than financial necessity. Sarah learned that Michael had structured his gift as a combination of direct payments and investment accounts that would provide ongoing income. Her student loans would be paid off immediately. Her master's degree would be fully funded, and she would receive a housing allowance that would allow her to move to a significantly better living situation. Beyond that, investment accounts had been established that would provide her with financial independence for the rest of her life, assuming reasonable management. "This is overwhelming," Sarah admitted to Jennifer as they reviewed the paperwork. "I keep expecting someone to tell me this is all a mistake or a dream." "I can understand that feeling," Jennifer replied with a warm smile. "But I've worked with Mr. Chen for several years now, and this type of generosity is actually quite characteristic of him. He tends to invest in people rather than just causes, and he's particularly drawn to situations where he can help someone who has already demonstrated exceptional character." The practical changes began immediately. Sarah gave notice at her cramped apartment and began house hunting with a budget that seemed impossibly generous. She found herself looking at places with actual yards, updated kitchens, and neighborhoods where she wouldn't worry about walking to her car after dark. The freedom to choose based on what she wanted, rather than what she could barely afford, was intoxicating. More significantly, Sarah was able to reduce her work schedule at Phoenix, general from 60 hours per week to a more manageable 40 hours. For the first time in years, she had energy left over after work, time to cook real meals instead of grabbing fast food between shifts, and the luxury of sleeping 8 hours without anxiety about whether she could afford to take a sick day. The changes in her stress levels were immediately apparent to her colleagues. Dr. Martinez, one of the emergency room physicians she worked with regularly, commented on how much more relaxed and energetic she seemed. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up," he told her during a brief break between patients. "You've always been a great nurse, but lately you seem to have an extra spark." Sarah found herself smiling more often, both at work and in her personal life. The constant background worry about money that had been her companion for years was simply gone, replaced by a sense of possibility and freedom that she was still learning to navigate. Her relationship with Michael and Emma deepened during this transition period. They developed a routine of meeting for dinner once a week, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes at Michael's house, which turned out to be a surprisingly modest home in a quiet Scottsdale neighborhood. Despite his wealth, Michael had chosen to raise Emma in an environment that emphasized normal childhood experiences over luxury. During one of these dinners, Emma presented Sarah with a drawing she'd made at school. It showed 3 stick figures standing together under a rainbow, labeled Daddy, Emma, and Sarah. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written "My family." "Emma," Sarah said, touched by the gesture, "this is beautiful, but you know I'm not actually part of your family, right?" "You are too," Emma replied, with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "Daddy says family isn't just about being related. It's about people who care about each other and help each other and want to spend time together. That's you." Sarah looked at Michael, who was watching the exchange with obvious emotion. "She's not wrong," he said quietly. "You've become very important to both of us." The comment stirred feelings in Sarah that she wasn't entirely sure how to process. Over the weeks since accepting Michael's offer, their relationship had evolved beyond gratitude and generosity into something that felt like genuine friendship and mutual care. She found herself looking forward to their weekly dinners, enjoying conversations about everything from Emma's school projects to Michael's business challenges. to Sarah's experiences in nursing. As autumn arrived in Phoenix, bringing the first relief from the intense summer heat, Sarah began the application process for master's degree programs. With financial constraints removed, she could choose programs based on academic quality and personal interest rather than cost and scheduling convenience. She found herself drawn to programs that focused on emergency and trauma nursing, wanting to deepen her expertise in the area where she'd discovered her greatest strengths. Michael proved to be an invaluable advisor during this process, helping her research programs, review applications, and think through how different options might align with her long-term career goals. His business background gave him insights into strategic planning and decision-making that complemented Sarah's clinical expertise. "Have you thought about what you want to do after you complete your master's degree?" Michael asked during one of their conversations about her educational plans. "I know I want to stay in emergency medicine," Sarah replied, "but beyond that, I'm not sure. Maybe become a nurse practitioner, or get involved in trauma program development, or even teach. Having options feels incredible after years of just trying to survive financially." "You know," Michael said thoughtfully, "Cloud Tech has been exploring opportunities in healthcare technology. We're particularly interested in developing systems that could improve emergency response and patient care coordination. Have you ever thought about the intersection between healthcare and technology?" The question opened up a line of conversation that continued over several weeks. Sarah found herself fascinated by the potential for technology to address some of the systemic challenges she'd observed in healthcare delivery. Emergency departments were often overwhelmed. Communication between different providers was frequently inadequate, and patients sometimes fell through cracks in the system that better coordination could prevent. Michael's interest in healthcare technology wasn't just business-driven. During their conversations, Sarah learned that his mother had faced significant medical challenges over the years, experiences that had given him insight into both the strengths and weaknesses of the healthcare system from a patient and family perspective. "I've seen how much difference individual healthcare workers like you can make," Michael told her, "but I've also seen how much the system could be improved with better tools and processes. I think there's huge potential for someone with your clinical expertise to help design solutions that actually work for frontline healthcare providers." The idea of combining her nursing background with technology development was intriguing, though Sarah wasn't sure she had the technical knowledge to contribute meaningfully to such projects. Michael suggested that her master's program might be an opportunity to explore healthcare informatics or quality improvement, fields that would give her the analytical tools to bridge clinical practice and system design. As winter settled over the desert, Sarah moved into her new home, a charming house in a safe neighborhood with a small yard and a front porch where she could sit and enjoy the mild Phoenix winters. The housewarming party she threw became an unexpected celebration of how much her life had changed in just a few months. Jessica flew in from Texas for the occasion, finally meeting Michael and Emma in person after months of hearing about them. Sarah's parents made the trip as well, still somewhat bewildered by their daughter's dramatic change in circumstances, but clearly thrilled to see her looking happier and more relaxed than she had in years. "I have to admit," Sarah's mother confided, "during the party, when you first told us about all this, your father and I were worried. It seemed too good to be true, and we were afraid you might be getting involved in something complicated or dangerous." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now I can see how much Michael and Emma care about you, and how much you care about them," her mother replied. "This isn't just about money, is it? You've found a family." The observation stayed with Sarah long after the party ended and her guests had returned to their respective homes. The relationship that had begun with a medical emergency at a gas station had indeed evolved into something that felt like family, though it was a kind of family she'd never experienced before. During the holidays, Sarah was invited to spend Christmas with Michael and Emma, an invitation she accepted with some nervousness about how to navigate gift-giving when your friend is a billionaire. She needn't have worried. Michael and Emma's approach to Christmas was surprisingly modest, focused on meaningful experiences rather than expensive presents. Emma gave Sarah a photo album she'd made documenting their friendship, starting with a picture Michael had taken of them at the coffee shop during their first meeting and continuing through various dinners and outings over the past several months. The final page contained a photo of the three of them at Sarah's housewarming party, with Emma's handwritten caption, "Sarah's Family." Sarah's gift to Emma was a children's book about nursing that she discovered during a shopping trip, along with a toy medical kit that would allow Emma to play doctor and nurse. Emma's delight with the gifts was infectious, and she immediately began treating both Sarah and Michael for various imaginary ailments. Michael's gift to Sarah was more complex, a beautifully bound portfolio containing research he'd commissioned about innovative nursing programs around the world, along with contact information for program directors and faculty members who might be valuable connections as Sarah developed her career plan. The thoughtfulness and effort behind the gift touched Sarah deeply. "I know you're still figuring out exactly what direction you want to take your career," Michael explained as Sarah paged through the portfolio. "But I wanted you to know that whatever you decide, you'll have access to the best people and programs in the field." Sarah's gift to Michael had been the most challenging to choose. What do you give someone who can afford anything? After much consideration, she decided on something personal rather than expensive. A leather-bound journal where she'd written detailed accounts of every emergency room case that had particularly moved or taught her over the past year, along with her reflections on what these experiences had taught her about resilience, compassion, and the impact that individual healthcare workers could have on patients' lives. "I wanted you to understand why nursing matters so much to me," Sarah explained, as Michael read through her entries. "And I wanted you to see how your support is allowing me to become better at something that I think really makes a difference in people's lives." Michael was visibly moved by the gift, spending much of Christmas evening reading Sarah's case studies and asking thoughtful questions about her experiences and observations. The conversation that followed helped Sarah articulate some of her own thoughts about how her career might evolve and what kind of impact she wanted to have in healthcare. As the new year began, Sarah received acceptance letters from several master's programs, including her top choice, a prestigious program in emergency and trauma nursing at a university known for its innovative approach to healthcare education. The program would allow her to continue working part-time while pursuing her degree, and it included opportunities for research and clinical leadership that aligned perfectly with her interests. The acceptance letter arrived on the same day that Michael asked Sarah to consider a more formal role in CloudTech's healthcare technology initiatives. He was creating a new division focused on emergency medicine applications, and he wanted Sarah to help lead the clinical development team once she completed her master's degree. "I know it's a big decision," Michael said as they discussed the opportunity over dinner. "And I want you to feel completely free to choose whatever path feels right for you. But I think your combination of clinical expertise and real-world experience could be invaluable in developing technology solutions that actually improve patient care." A D. The offer represented yet another dramatic shift in the trajectory Sarah had imagined for her life. A year ago, she'd been an overworked emergency room nurse struggling to pay off student loans. Now she was being offered the opportunity to help shape the future of healthcare technology while completing an advanced degree and building financial security for the rest of her life. More importantly, The offer came from people who had become genuinely important to her, people whose judgment and values she trusted completely. Working with Michael wouldn't just be a career opportunity, it would be a chance to deepen a friendship and professional relationship that had already enriched her life in countless ways. That evening, as Sarah sat in her beautiful new home, reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken, she thought about the series of small decisions that had led to this moment. The decision to take an extra shift at the hospital, the decision to stop for gas at a particular station, the decision to get out of her car when she heard someone in distress, the decision to trust Michael's offer and accept his help. Each of these decisions had seemed relatively small at the time, driven by immediate circumstances rather than grand life planning. Yet together, they had created a transformation that exceeded anything Sarah could have imagined or orchestrated deliberately. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. "Sarah, Daddy and I were talking about summer vacation. Do you want to come to the beach with us? Daddy says you probably need a real vacation since you work so hard." Sarah smiled as she typed. Her response, "I would love to come to the beach with you both." As she sent the message, Sarah realized that her transformation was still ongoing. The financial security and educational opportunities Michael had provided were just the foundation. The real change was in how she understood her own potential and her place in the world. A year ago, she'd seen herself as someone who responded to crises and helped people during their worst moments. That was still true, but now she also saw herself as someone who could help design systems that prevented crises or made them easier to manage. She was no longer just reacting to circumstances. She was positioned to help shape them. The next morning, Sarah called Michael to accept his offer to join Cloudtech's healthcare division after completing her master's degree. As they discussed the details of her future role, Sarah felt a sense of excitement and purpose that went beyond personal satisfaction. She was about to embark on work that could potentially help thousands of patients and healthcare workers, using the platform and resources that Michael's generosity had made available to her. The ripple effects of her decision to help a stranger at a gas station were expanding in ways that would benefit people she would never meet, in situations she couldn't currently imagine. That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Maria Santos, her former nursing instructor and mentor. Maria had heard about Sarah's acceptance to the master's program and wanted to congratulate her. "I'm so proud of you," Maria said, "but I'm not surprised. I always knew you had the potential to do something extraordinary in healthcare." "I'm not sure I would have believed that a year ago," Sarah replied honestly. "That's the thing about potential," Maria said. "Sometimes it takes the right circumstances to reveal what was always there. You were always capable of this level of impact, Sarah. You just needed the opportunity and support to realize it." As the conversation ended, Sarah found herself thinking about other nurses, other healthcare workers who had the same potential she'd had, but lacked the extraordinary circumstances that had opened up new possibilities for her. That thought planted the seed of an idea that would eventually become one of her most important contributions to Michael's philanthropic efforts. 6 months later, as Sarah was completing her first semester of graduate school while also beginning her consulting work with Cloudtech's healthcare division, she proposed the creation of a scholarship and mentorship program for healthcare workers who wanted to advance their education but faced financial barriers. The Sarah Martinez Healthcare Leadership Fund, established with Michael's enthusiastic support, would eventually provide educational opportunities for hundreds of nurses, paramedics, and other healthcare professionals, creating a multiplying effect that extended Sarah's impact far beyond her own career achievements. At the fund's inaugural gala, held exactly 2 years after the night Sarah had stopped for gas at Desert Rose gas station, she stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of healthcare professionals, technology innovators and philanthropists who had come together to support the next generation of healthcare leaders. 2 years ago, Sarah began her speech, I was driving home from a long shift at the hospital when I stopped for gas and heard someone in distress. I thought I was just helping one person during a medical emergency. I had no idea that simple act of compassion would lead to friendships that would change my life, opportunities I never could have imagined, and the chance to help other healthcare workers achieve their own dreams of making a difference. She paused, looking at Michael and Emma, who were sitting in the front row, beaming with pride, then continued. The most important thing I've learned over these past 2 years is that extraordinary change often begins with ordinary kindness. When we choose to help others without thinking about what we might receive in return, we create possibilities that extend far beyond what we can see in the moment. Tonight, we're celebrating not just the healthcare workers who will benefit from this fund, but the principle that when good people support each other, there's no limit to the positive change we can create together. As applause filled the ballroom, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She was still a nurse, still someone who responded to people in crisis with skill and compassion. But now she was also an educator, a technology innovator, and a philanthropist whose influence would ripple through the healthcare system for generations to come. The transformation that had begun with a heart attack at a gas station had become something far greater than either Sarah or Michael could have envisioned that first night. It had become a story about the power of human connection, the importance of recognizing and nurturing potential, and the extraordinary things that can happen when people choose to invest in each other's dreams. Years later, when Sarah would tell this story to her own nursing students, she would emphasize that the most crucial moment wasn't when Michael revealed his wealth or when she accepted his offer. The most crucial moment was when she chose to get out of her car and help a stranger in distress, not knowing anything about who he was or what that choice might lead to. That choice, made from pure compassion and professional duty, had created a cascade of positive change that continued to expand with each passing year. It was a reminder that we never know when our small acts of kindness might change not just someone else's life, but our own, and ultimately the world around us. The conversation with Jessica that night had planted a seed of courage in Sarah's mind, but it was the email waiting for her the next morning that truly crystallized her decision. Michael had sent her a detailed breakdown of exactly what his offer entailed, and seeing the specifics in black and white made everything feel suddenly, startlingly real. The numbers were staggering. Complete elimination of her $68,000 in student debt, which had been a crushing weight on her shoulders for years. Full funding for any master's degree program she chose, including not just tuition, but also living expenses, books, and even conference attendance. A housing allowance that would allow her to move from her cramped apartment in a questionable neighborhood to somewhere safe and comfortable. And beyond all that, an investment portfolio that would provide her with genuine financial security for the rest of her life. Sarah read through the email 3 times, each reading making the reality more concrete and more overwhelming. This wasn't just help with her immediate financial struggles. This was complete life transformation, the kind of change that would affect every decision she made for decades to come. But what struck her most was the thoughtfulness evident in how Michael had structured everything. He hadn't just decided to throw money at her problems. He'd clearly spent time understanding her specific circumstances, her goals, and her values. The master's degree funding, for instance, included provisions for her to continue working part-time, if she chose, recognizing that nursing was central to her identity, not just her income source. There was also a section of the email that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Michael had included information about a scholarship fund he wanted to establish in her name, designed to help other healthcare workers pursue advanced education. The Sarah Martinez Healthcare Leadership Fund would provide opportunities for nurses, paramedics, and other frontline medical professionals who demonstrated exceptional compassion and skill but lacked the financial resources to advance their careers. "I know this might seem premature," Michael had written, "but I've seen enough of your character to know that you'll want to use this opportunity to help others. This fund would allow your impact to extend far beyond your individual career, creating a legacy of healthcare professionals who share your values and dedication." Sarah set down her phone and walked to her small kitchen window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline as the morning sun painted the desert mountains in shades of gold and pink. The city looked the same as it had yesterday, but everything felt different now. She was being offered not just a new life, but a chance to create lasting positive change for other people facing the same struggles she'd experienced. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was her supervisor at Phoenix General asking if she could cover an extra shift that afternoon because another nurse had called in sick. 6 months ago, Sarah would have automatically said yes, driven by financial necessity. Today, for the first time in years, she had a choice. "Let me call you back in a few minutes," Sarah told her supervisor, an answer that would have been unthinkable before this week. Instead of immediately agreeing to work extra hours, Sarah found herself considering what she actually wanted to do with her day. The freedom to make that choice felt almost dizzy with possibility. She could cover the shift if she wanted to help her colleagues, but she didn't have to do it just to pay her bills. The realization of what that meant hit her like a wave. For the first time since nursing school, she would be able to make career decisions based on what excited her professionally, rather than what she could afford. She could choose assignments that challenged her skills and advanced her knowledge, rather than simply accepting whatever shifts paid the most or were available. Sarah called her supervisor back and agreed to cover the shift, but for the right reasons this time. The emergency department was understaffed, her colleagues needed support, and she genuinely enjoyed the challenge of busy emergency shifts making. The choice from a position of freedom rather than desperation felt entirely different. That afternoon at the hospital, Sarah found herself seeing her work environment with new eyes. She noticed things that had become invisible through familiarity and financial stress. The outdated computer system that made documentation unnecessarily time-consuming. The lack of proper break room facilities that forced staff to eat meals. Standing in hallways. The shortage of specialized equipment that sometimes delayed patient care. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to think beyond just surviving her immediate circumstances. What if she could help address some of these systemic issues? What if she pursued the master's degree in healthcare administration she'd always been interested in, but never thought she could afford? What if she could eventually move into leadership roles where she could improve working conditions for other nurses? During her break, Sarah called Michael to schedule a time to discuss his offer in person. She'd made her decision, but she wanted to look him in the eye when she accepted, to make sure he understood the magnitude of what he was offering and her gratitude for his incredible generosity. They arranged to meet the following evening at a quiet restaurant in Scottsdale, neutral territory, where they could have a serious conversation without the emotional weight of the hospital or the casual atmosphere of a coffee shop. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about the conversation she'd had with Maria Santos, her nursing mentor, earlier that week. Maria had listened to the whole story with the wisdom of someone who'd spent 30 years in healthcare and had seen every possible variation of human behavior under stress. "Sarah," Maria had said, "in all my years of nursing, I've learned that the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. You were exactly where Michael needed you to be that night. with exactly the skills and compassion required to save his life, but I think he might be exactly where you need him to be right now, too." "What do you mean?" Sarah had asked. "I mean that you've spent years taking care of everyone else while barely taking care of yourself. You've worked yourself to exhaustion, lived with constant financial stress, and put your own dreams on hold because you couldn't afford to pursue them. Maybe it's time to let someone take care of you for a change." Maria's words had resonated deeply with Sarah because they addressed her deepest fear about accepting Michael's offer. She'd always prided herself on being independent and self-sufficient. The idea of accepting such significant help felt like admitting weakness or failure. But as she reflected on Maria's perspective, Sarah began to see the situation differently. Accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a recognition that we're all interconnected, that sometimes the most generous thing we can do is allow others to express their gratitude and care in meaningful ways. The next evening, Sarah arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, wanting time to settle her nerves before what felt like one of the most important conversations of her life. She'd chosen to wear the navy blue dress she typically reserved for job interviews or important occasions, wanting to signal that she understood the significance of the moment. Michael arrived exactly on time, looking more formal than she'd seen him before, in a tailored suit that subtly hinted at his wealth without being ostentatious. But his warm smile and genuine pleasure at seeing her immediately put Sarah at ease. "Thank you for meeting with me," Sarah said as they settled at their table. "I've been thinking about everything you said and about your incredibly generous offer." "I hope you've had time to really consider it," Michael replied. "I know it's a lot to process, and I want you to feel completely comfortable with whatever decision you make." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change the trajectory of her entire life. "I want to accept your offer," she said quietly, "but I need you to understand something first." Michael leaned forward slightly, his expression attentive and serious. "I've never been in a situation like this before," Sarah continued. "I've always made my own way, paid my own bills, solved my own problems. Accepting help on this scale feels overwhelming and frankly a little scary. But I've realized that my discomfort with accepting help is less important than the good that could come from this opportunity." "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "I mean that this isn't just about me," Sarah explained. "Yes, eliminating my student debt and funding my education will change my life dramatically. But what really excites me is the possibility of using these opportunities to help other people. The scholarship fund you mentioned, the chance to pursue advanced education and move into leadership roles, the ability to make career choices based on impact rather than income. All of that could benefit many more people than just me." Michael's face broke into a wide smile. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." "There's something else," Sarah added. "I want to understand more about your company and your approach to business. If I'm going to accept this kind of generosity from you, I want to know that your values align with mine. I want to visit CloudTech, meet some of your employees, and get a sense of how you operate as a leader." "I think that's very wise," Michael said immediately. "In fact, I'd be disappointed if you didn't want to know more about me and my company before making such a significant decision. How about this week? I could give you a full tour, introduce you to key members of our team, and show you some of the projects we're working on." Over the course of dinner, Sarah and Michael discussed the practical details of implementing his offer. The legal and financial structures would be handled by Michael's attorneys and financial advisors, but Sarah would have complete control over how the funds were used and how quickly various elements were implemented. "I don't want you to feel rushed about any of this," Michael emphasized. If you want to finish your current lease before moving, if you want to complete certain commitments at work before reducing your hours, if you want to take time choosing the right master's program, all of that is entirely up to you. Actually, Sarah said, surprising herself with her decisiveness, I think I want to move fairly quickly on some things. I've been living in survival mode for so long that I'm excited about the possibility of actually thriving for once. As their conversation continued, Sarah found herself sharing dreams and aspirations she'd kept buried for years. The idea of pursuing a master's degree in emergency nursing with a focus on trauma systems, her interest in healthcare quality improvement and patient safety initiatives, a long-term vision of potentially teaching nursing or developing training programs for emergency medical professionals. Michael listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and making connections between Sarah's goals and opportunities she might not have considered. His business experience gave him insights into strategic planning and career development that complemented Sarah's clinical expertise. You know, Michael said as they were finishing dinner, CloudTech has been exploring opportunities in healthcare. Technology, we're particularly interested in developing systems that could improve emergency response coordination and patient care delivery. Your background and interests could be incredibly valuable as we develop those initiatives. The comment opened up an entirely new realm of possibilities that Sarah hadn't considered. The intersection of healthcare and technology was a rapidly growing field, and her clinical experience combined with advanced education could position her to contribute to innovations that might help thousands of patients and healthcare workers. That sounds fascinating, Sarah replied. Though I have to admit, I don't know much about the technology side of healthcare. That's exactly why your perspective would be valuable, Michael explained. Too many healthcare technologies are developed by people who understand computers, but don't understand the realities of clinical practice. We need input from people who know what actually works in emergency situations, what information doctors and nurses need most urgently, and how technology can support rather than complicate patient care. As they left the restaurant, Sarah felt as if she was stepping into a completely different life than the one she'd woken up to that morning. The conversation with Michael had transformed his offer from an abstract possibility into a concrete plan for the future. There's one more thing I want to mention, Michael said as they reached the parking area. Emma has been asking about you almost daily since we met at the coffee shop. She's decided that you're her friend now, and she's been making plans for activities we could all do together. I hope that's okay with you. Sarah's heart melted at the thought of the sweet little girl who'd been so brave during her father's medical emergency. I would love to spend more time with Emma. She's a remarkable kid. She gets that from her mother, Michael said with a softness in his voice that made Sarah realize she still knew very little about his personal life beyond his relationship with Emma. Will I get to meet Emma's mother? Sarah asked gently, not wanting to pry but curious about the family dynamics. Michael's expression grew more serious, and Sarah immediately regretted asking what was clearly a sensitive question. Emma's mother died in a car accident when Emma was 3, Michael said quietly. It's been just the two of us for the past 5 years. Sarah felt her heart clench with sympathy for both Michael and Emma. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have asked. It's okay, Michael replied. It's actually one of the reasons your presence in our lives means so much to me. Emma doesn't have many positive female role models, and she's clearly drawn to you in a way that makes me think her mother would have approved. The revelation added another layer of meaning to everything that had transpired between them. Sarah wasn't just accepting help from a grateful patient. She was becoming part of a small family that had experienced profound loss and was learning to build new connections. Driving home that night, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement, gratitude, and overwhelming responsibility. She was about to embark on a completely different life trajectory, one that would affect not just her own future, but potentially the lives of many other people through the scholarship fund, her future work in healthcare, and her relationship with Michael and Emma. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of purpose and energy she hadn't felt in years. She called the financial advisor Michael had recommended and scheduled an appointment to begin the process of implementing the various components of his offer. She also began researching master's degree programs with new criteria, focusing on academic excellence and alignment with her interests rather than cost and scheduling convenience. But perhaps most importantly, she called Phoenix General's Human Resources Department and submitted a request to reduce her schedule to 40 hours per week. For the first time in her nursing career, she would be able to work a normal schedule that would allow her to rest, recharge, and pursue other interests. The HR representative seemed surprised by the request. "Are you sure about this, Sarah? I know money's been tight for you, and we've got plenty of overtime available." "I'm sure," Sarah replied with confidence she'd never felt before when making financial decisions. "I'm ready to work smarter rather than just working more." That afternoon, Sarah visited Cloud Tech headquarters for the tour Michael had promised. The building was impressive, but not ostentatious, designed with clean lines and environmentally conscious features that suggested a company that cared about both aesthetics and responsibility. The tour exceeded Sarah's expectations in every way. Michael introduced her to employees at every level of the organization, from recent college graduates in entry-level positions to senior executives who'd been with the company for years. Without exception, people spoke positively about working for Cloud Tech, citing not just competitive compensation, but also meaningful work, excellent benefits, and a company culture that valued both professional excellence and work-life balance. "We have a philosophy here," Michael explained as they walked through the research and development department, "that our success depends entirely on our people's success. So we invest heavily in creating an environment where talented people want to build their careers." Sarah was particularly impressed by Cloud Tech's commitment to diversity and inclusion. The workforce included people of all backgrounds, ages, and experience levels, and several employees mentioned specific programs the company had implemented to ensure equal opportunities for advancement and professional development. "We also have pretty extensive community outreach programs," Michael mentioned as they passed a bulletin board covered with photos from various volunteer activities. "Employees get paid time off for community service, and the company matches charitable contributions dollar for dollar." The tour concluded in Michael's office, which was spacious but not ostentatious, with windows offering a panoramic view of the desert landscape. The walls featured photos of Cloud Tech's various charitable initiatives, including technology centers the company had funded in underserved communities and scholarship programs for students studying computer science and engineering. "I wanted you to see this place," Michael said as they settled into comfortable chairs near his desk, "because I know that accepting help from someone requires trust. I wanted you to see how I approach business and leadership, so you could make an informed decision about whether you're comfortable with me having a role in your future." "I have to admit, this isn't what I expected," Sarah said honestly. "What did you expect?" "I'm not sure exactly. Maybe something more corporate in a negative way, more focused on profit at the expense of people. But everyone here seems genuinely happy to work for you, and the company culture feels really positive." Michael smiled at her observation. "That's intentional. I learned early in my career that success without meaning is pretty empty. Cloud Tech's mission is to use technology to solve real problems for real people, and to do it in a way that creates value for everyone involved, not just shareholders." As Sarah prepared to leave CloudTech, she felt convinced that Michael's values aligned with her own. The generosity he was showing her wasn't an isolated gesture. It was consistent with how he approached all his relationships, both personal and professional. That evening, Sarah called Michael to formally accept his offer and begin the process of transforming her life in ways she could never have imagined just weeks before. The conversation was brief but emotional, with both of them recognizing the significance of the moment. "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "I don't have adequate words for how grateful I am, but I promise you that I'll use this opportunity to help as many other people as possible." "I know you will," Michael replied. "That's exactly why you deserve it." As Sarah hung up the phone, she looked around her small apartment with new eyes. Soon, she would be able to afford something larger, safer, more comfortable. She would be able to visit her family more often, pursue advanced education without financial stress, and make career decisions based on what excited her rather than what paid the most. But perhaps most importantly, she would be able to continue doing the work she loved, caring for patients and making a difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments, without the constant background stress of financial insecurity. The transformation was beginning, and Sarah could hardly wait to see where this new path would lead her. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.